In an unknown time period after James created the universe, James felt the universe was empty. Was it just him in this vast, infinite space of time? James flew off planet James and headed to James. James arrived at James. James saw another being. He couldn't believe it. The other person looked human, but had long flowing brown hair that was as long as Thor's from the Thor movies. The other being had brown eyes and a somewhat narrowish face with synchronized facial features. His beard was long and was colored poop brown. James yelled, "Who be you?" The being stopped in its tracks and looked behind him and saw James. The being replied with, "I am Lord David of the 4th Squad. I created this planet's moons and I populated it with a new type of being called fish." James gasped and couldn't believe there was another being in the world, and one as powerful as him. This blew James's mind. James always thought he was the most powerful. James furrowed his brow and looked Lord David straight in the eyes and said, "It is nice to meet you, Lord David. Let me ask you a question. Are you the only being you know in this mass?" Lord David laughed, put his fist to his chest and roared, "Of course I'm the only person I've seen before, but I've been sleeping for a long time. I like to sleep, you know. I woke up to a bunch of new things, such as planets and stars, instead of being whiteness. So I've been looking around to see how all of this came to be. Pray tell, what is your name, being?" "James. My name is James. I come from planet James. Perhaps you've heard of it. I created the universe as I grew bored, out of just oblivion all around me." Lord David looked startled and a little tired. His black suit a little wrinkled, but still made Lord David look real hot and sexy. Lord David spoke loud, but in a little high-pitched voice. He exclaimed, "James, it is a pleasure to meet you. I just had to banish my brother Airbird from the planet Celsius. You will soon learn not to backstab the Lord of the 4th Squad." James stood back and flexed his arms. His huge biceps and triceps glistened from the sun, and made Lord David's jaw drop a small amount. "Wait, I thought you said you never saw another being, Lord David. Were you lying? That's going to have to be one hail James for you, or I may have to smite you." Lord David laughed. "Yeah, I lie a lot. I apologize, James. Perhaps I've seen a bit more things than I let on. But that's another conversation. Did you just threaten to smite me, James? Do you realize how powerful I truly am? I am Lord David of the 4th Squad." James replied quickly with a, "Yeah, I understand you're Lord David, but I am James. I created James trees and vodka. And vodka, you need to realize who you are talking to." Lord David, clearly upset over James' taunts and words, turns away for a second, then faces James again. He shouts, "I am Lord David of the 4th Squad. If you happen to even approach me with an intimidating attitude, I will have to strike you down." James was having none of it. He took a step forward and noticed Lord David had some nice-ass dress shoes on. James liked dress shoes. James' favorite color was brown, so when James saw Lord David's brown dress shoes, his anger subsided and he said, "Nice shoes, Lord David." Lord David's anger subsided when he heard that compliment, and replied with, "Thank you, James. Is that a new haircut? It's looking sexy and damn good, James." James blushed a little and said, "Yeah, it's new, thanks for asking." "Well, I must be going, James. It was a pleasure to meet you. I hope we meet again sometime. I need to deal with my brother Airbert." James let out a wide, fish-look grin and said, "Yeah, thank you." David flew off. James was for the first time in his life in love and pissed at the same time. He had an enemy, but he had loved Lord David at the same time. He couldn't explain the feeling. It was only a feeling a god could have. James described this feeling to me in my dreams, and described it as loving your dog even if he bites you every time you pet him. James, after that experience, felt alone for the first time in his life. He sat down and thought for a second, to a minute, about what to do. So he decided upon it. "I'll create life, I suppose, but they won't even have close to my same power. James created everything you could think of, all the animals from Bigfoot to panda bears. James' favorite animal was either Bigfoot or Jameslodons, possibly even the James Doe bird. James looked around in astonishment at his creations. So many beautiful creatures he made. They couldn't speak, though. James wasn't feeling this as much as he thought, though. Maybe he could watch this beast for a while and see if anything different happens. James thought, James, you know it would be cool if these beasts could evolve on their own and intelligence could grow. And so James let it be and watched as evolution took its toll on James. Still, though, James couldn't shake the feeling that an evil was brewing elsewhere in the universe. James felt he knew everything he made. He couldn't believe there was another being named Lord David, whose power could be equal, lesser, or even more powerful than he was. James had so many questions, but James shrugged it off for now and headed back to Planet James, where he subsided and felt the frozen forgotten ones to create. James left Planet James and headed to Mars, another planet he made closer to James. James hoped that someday the people of James would land on Mars and mate with the people that James made on Mars. James created a being on Mars, similar looking to humans, but their skin glowed green, and they walked almost hunchback. James called these beings Jamesbryantology. Jamesbryantology had 4 eyes and could move extremely fast. They had average intelligence in comparison to humans, not enough of them to develop machines to fly through space, but enough for James. James watched the Jamesbryantology and thought to himself, these beings are somewhat useless. He kept watching them for another 100 years as they sprinted among the planet, developing their technology. James was bored, extremely bored. James decided to give the Jamesbryantology huge claws so they could tunnel throughout Mars, and he also gave them the power to camouflage themselves should they feel threatened. James looked at them go and enjoyed every minute of it. James gave a couple of Jamesbryantology women a ramming. James enjoyed a good ramming. Herpes was passed on to the Jamesbryantology. Oh well, James thought to himself, they can deal with this. James knew they couldn't, but he wasn't feeling the most merciful that day. Soon the Jamesbryantology died one by one to the herpes. Any Jamesbryantology who didn't have it stayed healthy, but James enjoyed ramming. So one by one they all got infected. The Jamesbryantology went extinct, their skeletons littering Mars. But James knew by the time humans arrived on Mars, the skeletons would be so far underground it would take a couple thousand years for them to discover the bones.